Excellent. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Thursday night portion with Jen and Robin. We're always excited to be here with you the third Thursday of the month. For those of you who are watching it recorded, thank you for giving us some of your time. We are starting a new book tonight. We are starting the book of Deuteronomy, or Devarim. And one of the things I really feel like is cool, that I always say this every time I get to Deuteronomy each year, is if you take the titles of the first 5 books, what does it say? And it's cliche, but there might be someone that doesn't know. So if you take the first 5 books and you take the Hebrew words of Bereshith and Shemot and Vayikra and Bamidbar and Devarim, and you put them together, you get a beautiful story, which I love to say this at the beginning of Deuteronomy because it is a new book and we're starting with a recap of all the words. So when you put it all together, it says, in the beginning, these are the names of the called out ones in the wilderness, and these are the words. And I like to add, given to them, as this reminder of they're coming out of the wilderness and they're getting ready to go into the promised land. There's so much happening at the beginning of this parsha. We see a transition of leadership. Moses' time is over. Joshua's coming up. But it's really cool to me that this book starts the beginning of a beautiful, long oracle given by Moses at the very end of his life. And I just want to set the stage for our conversation. Be reminded that he is now speaking to a brand new generation of people. They had some eyewitness account of some of the miracles that the Holy One had done for his people, but they weren't around from the beginning, and they needed to be reminded of the history of the forefathers. And as a leader, Moses is preparing to pass the torch on to Joshua. I don't think I said Joshua before, passing the torch on to Joshua. And he knows he's going to die outside the land. And he's doing what he thinks is important, what the Father is instructing him to do to help prepare the people of Israel for what's ahead. He's taking all of this history of the forefathers and reminding them of all of the stories and things that they happened. And primarily the book opens up what happens when disobedience runs rampant. But I believe that this is a really beautiful act of love, not only on the part of Moses, but obviously on the part of Yah, because he's giving Moses this cue to prepare the people to offer these words to the next generation, to remind them, 1, who God is, and 2, he's going to set the stage for what faith looks like. So every year we get something different from the parshas. And this particular year, I called Robin this morning and I'm like, okay, I'm really getting this whole concept of leadership this year. How do we train up leaders for the next generation, and what does that look like? Leadership to me was Moses's greatest last act. He was doing something that was going to edify the body, build up their faith. He was doing it through sharing the Torah instructions and providing testimony of all of Yah's faithfulness to the previous generations. And he's also going to talk about the righteousness of our holy God. So I think we can apply this 2 ways. First, Moses reminds this new generation that the instructions are for them. These aren't old. Sometimes today in our culture, we're like, that was then, this is now. But Moses is the first person to really make sure that this next generation is aware. This is a covenant for all generations, for all who belong to the Father. And secondly, he is encouraging them to teshuvah, or repent, and to not make the same mistakes as forefathers. So anyway, we'll talk about this more when we get to Isaiah and we look at the Haftarah. But I think a parallel that I'm hoping to make with Robin today is, just as Isaiah warned the inhabitants of Jerusalem about their behavior, Moses is also warning this next generation, this upcoming generation, that there is going to be consequences for disobeying God. And he just encourages them to walk uprightly. So that's just going to be kind of a little bit of my opening, Robin. And I don't know where you want to go with this leadership, but I kind of want to talk about biblical leadership, how Moses demonstrated that a little bit, and where else we see this type of leadership in scripture. Can we do that for a minute?
Woo, that's a deep dive, isn't it?
It's a deep dive, but I think, leadership can be done by anyone. So anyone can be a leader, right? Anyone, because a leader is just simply someone who is doing something that others will follow. Now, there are bad leaders and there are good leaders, but Moses to me was a good leader. And I was thinking about this. I was watching just a little bit of last year's portion. I just watched like the first 15 minutes, and it was Rebecca with her adorable mother. I love her mother. I think she calls her Nona. Aww. So it was Rebecca and Nona. And one of the things Nona said that really resonated with me is, look at how Moses grew into a leadership position. He didn't start as a strong leader. He was afraid. I don't want to do this. I don't have the right words. I'm not handsome. I'm not strong in speech. But at the end, he delivers this oracle to this generation. And it's a beautiful picture of how all of that time with the Father made him a great leader. So to me, I feel inspired. Like, I can do that. You can do that. We can all do that. We can all be great leaders if we lean into our faith and let the Father lead us in his instructions.
Right. And I think, there's something about Moses, right? That I don't know that we can all be leaders, right? We can all lead, but to really truly be someone that doesn't lead people astray, right? The blind lead the blind and they both fall into a ditch. There was a leader involved in that. And I think that we should, I don't know, it's like revering it, right? Like, one of the things that I love about how this opens is, these cities, right, that they're leaving, that we get some geography, but they're going into, it was 11 days journey in verse 2. It was 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to where are they going? Kadesh. They're going to a holy, set apart place. And I think that, you've got to have a leader with really solid vision if that's where you're going, right? And he had really solid vision. In fact, we see that, the Song of Moses is sung even in the book of Revelation. So it's like the breadth of the leadership quality that Moses had and that God placed within him and put in Pharaoh's house and all the things that we've seen. I mean, it's just this really beautiful, beautiful chapter, and how he's, like you said, Jen, he's basically given the pep talk. All right, we're going in. It's going to get holy. Y'all got to mind your P's and Q's, because I really don't want any more of you to die. Right.
So one of the comparisons that I saw in Isaiah and in Devarim is, in this beginning, is that there is this underlying, I don't know if it's underlying, it's kind of outward in Isaiah, but there's this principle that says the Father is going to purify the land. Right. So either be on board or don't be on board, but it's going to get purified. And I feel like the examples that Moses gave, and I don't know if you can talk more about the link that you read with Tony Robinson today or not. I didn't have a chance to look at that, where, he picked out these locations, but they actually were these reminders of this sin. And it's going to be purified. So teshuvah, repent and turn, so that you're not part of the coming destruction. Right. And that's still relevant for us today.
It is. And that's something that I don't think we really recognize. One, because here's something that let's do some contrast, right? They're not in a holy place. They're in the wilderness, but they're going into Kadesh Barnea, right? And so they're going into the holy place. And just like us today, most of our environment isn't necessarily holy. We may be a holy vessel in that space, right? Maybe moment by moment with this thing in mind, but most of the spaces we aren't going into are that spiritually volatile, where it's like you can tell you've crossed the threshold and you better be ready to go and enter in. And so I think that that's one of the things, that he's like, okay, we've got 11 days. I'm going to need you guys to be on your best behavior. I will turn this car around if the Lord lets me. That's kind of what I sense there. But I loved just to point out the snippet from what Tony Robbins mentioned from Isaiah was that, we see the names Tophel and Laban as
Yep.
part of the geography mentioned, the cities. And it says that the sages are like, we can't really find, these places, but the meanings of those words point back to, Tophel was complaining and Laban was white. So Tophel complaining and the white being representative of like the manna, right, that they complained against, right? And they needed other food, they needed other meat. It wasn't good enough. And it was to get their attention, right, of past offenses of their forefathers who clearly are not with them and did die.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I just thought that was really, I don't think, Jen, you and I were talking about this earlier too, like in reflection of our attitudes, how we invite people in, how we make distinction in things, like, are we doing it like in the hypocrisy, right? Like, because he mentions in Isaiah specifically, the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah were, will be nothing compared to yours, right? And those sins initially, he's mentioned, actually it's in Ezekiel, it's not in Isaiah, but he's mentioning, that those sins were, you wouldn't share your bread, you wouldn't feed the poor, you wouldn't clothe the stranger, you kept it all to yourself.
Yeah. There's so many principles in this first chapter. And I want to, before we get into kind of deeper into the Haftarah, which I definitely want to go there, as we're talking about leadership and leadership principles and, Moses's transformation over the 40 years and clearly, so you made a comment and said, well, we're not all leaders. Well, I agree and I disagree. And it's okay that we have that because I feel like anytime we represent the Father as an image bearer, we have a higher accountability than everyone, which to me puts us naturally in a leadership type position, because if we take that third commandment seriously and we do not bring his name to naught, that means that our testimony is really important, our level of integrity, how we carry ourselves, our character. And so to me, for my children who are watching me, for my community who's watching me, my Torah community and like my work community or, other communities, like I am out front because I bear the name of Yod He Vav He outwardly, right? I'm wearing my tzitzits, I'm keeping the Sabbath, I'm doing the things, but there is this element of character that I really want to talk about before we go into the Haftarah. And in chapter 1, verse 13, they kind of give these characteristics, and they say when you're choosing leaders, and you're deciding who to kind of put in position, he says, choose men wise and understanding and known to your tribes, and let me appoint them as your head. And so when there was this choosing of leaders, bringing forth these people to help Moses, there were very specific criteria. They were to have wisdom, which we know the Torah is wisdom. They were to have understanding, and then it says, and known to your tribes. But I looked that up, and mine says, if you look it up in the complete Jewish Bible, it says knowledge. Sometimes known is like intimacy, like Adam knew Eve. This was just a little different. So there's this idea that a leader should have certain characteristics. They need to have wisdom, they need to have understanding, and they need to be knowledgeable. And so in one of the studies I listened to last year, and I kind of went back and listened to this section again because I remember it really impacting me. When we're told to find leaders that have wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, 3 of the stories that Moses repeats, one is in Exodus 31, and then one is Exodus 14:31, and the other one is Exodus 19:9. But Moses picks, interestingly, like these little snippets of stories, because he doesn't tell everything, but he really gets a lot of the highlights where the lessons were to be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what he's trying to instill in these three examples is, what does it look like to truly have faith?
Yeah.
Or we can call it in Hebrew like amuna.
Yeah.
So, what does it look like? Now, we know today, modern day, faith is just a mental ascension belief. I believe Jesus is real and whatever. And it doesn't always have this deeper love following meaning. But if you look at Exodus 4:31, it talks about how the Holy One sees the suffering of his people and he responds with empathy. And so, one characteristic of a good leader is to be empathetic. The second one he talks about in Exodus 14:31 is he's reminded of the parting of the sea and some of these miraculous deeds, or he reminds the people,
Mm-hmm.
like, do not forget his power. Like, let's not minimize who he is and what his traits are, and that we have access to that power. The third one in 19:9 is, which Exodus 19 is like, I think one of my favorite chapters of the entire Bible. I love it, love it, love it. That and Deuteronomy 8, my two favorite. But in Exodus 19 is where he gives, he gives the covenant. He says, if you obey my statutes, my laws, and my ordinances, then I will be your God, and you will be my people. And they responded with, we will. So there is this covenant of love that's given there. And that's the understanding to me. That's a huge part of understanding. So when I look at this and I'm like, okay, so when he's trying to define leaders and he gives these examples and then he gives these words, what is he saying? And I feel like he's saying, if you're going to lead, if you want to be someone who's out front, then one, you better be empathetic towards other people.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to go with the Isaiah 1 and what we talked about right before everyone got on the call. Secondly, do not forget the power of the Holy One of Israel. Like, be reminded that his power supersedes anything we can do as humanity. So I guess in that, like, Rabbi Foreman has a teaching on this about who do you give authority to? Where does your commitment lie? Do you try to do things in your own strength, or are you relying on God's power to lead you as a leader? And then obviously knowing and understanding and living out Torah, not just in word, but in deed, in action. Like we are to love in spirit and truth. We are to be spirit and truth. And we might have the truth part because we check some of the boxes, but what does it really look like to live out Imuna? True faith.
True. Yeah. Wow.
And do we do it well? And I'm going to say, for me, I was really convicted. Like, not really.
No, I don't.
Really.
No, not really. I was reading my Musar, so I don't know if anybody on here is, doing Musar with Kishore. That's actually, I think, ended, but I'm still working with my way through. And it was Hesed, loving kindness, and talking about doing the acts of loving kindness, and basically how much work I personally need, because our society is set up to where we don't need anyone, right?
Yeah.
I don't, but I could do DoorDash. I can get my groceries delivered. I can do, click and pick or whatever with my grocery order and just pick it up and never have to see a human being.
Right.
And how can I possibly empathize with people I'm not connected to? How can I possibly do loving kindness? How can I be attentive to the needs, the personal needs, right? The intimate ones that only those who are actually around know about. If I'm so very isolated from other human beings. And I loved how in that chapter of the book, it doesn't matter where they are in relationship to the Father. It doesn't matter. This wasn't like to the believing community. It doesn't matter. You need to do loving kindness to everyone, because you are extending that loving kindness straight from heaven, right? Straight from the throne. And he has certainly bestowed it to me, his loving kindness to me. And I have received his loving kindness through acts of others, right? Thinking about like forgiveness, right? How great forgiveness is when you've messed up with somebody in your life and they, they don't hold it against you, that kind of thing. And it's really hard, right?
Mhm.
Like in our society today. And that's those are kind of like, the attitudes, right? Like what goes on inside of a camp of, I don't remember how many people are in here, but a lot, like a million, right?
Yeah. Couple,
Um,
things. Well,
couple
depending on
million, right?
women, children. Yeah.
And so I just, yeah, I think that while it's not, he's reminding them, right from the beginning, Tophel and Laban. We read those and we just think, this is a city or a stopping point. Our Western minds just think, oh, it's just a place on a map, right? But it was more than that. It would recall them, about the sins of the people that they loved that died because they did not honor the Father with their attitudes.
We have such a heart for rebellion. And I have a note from last year too, that in chapter 1, verse 26,
Mm,
it says, "You would not go up and rebelled against the mouth of Yahovah your Elohim, and grumbled in your tents, and said, because Yahovah was hating us, he has brought us out to the land of Mitzrayim to give us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us." And I
mhm.
was thinking about that. There's a couple things in there. One is, and I always remember this about this, this chapter in the Word where, the spies originally, or I think it was the spies, didn't want to go up, and then there was going to be like a consequence. And like, oh, forget it, we'll go. But Yah says, don't go.
Don't
If you
go.
go, I'm not with you. And I think sometimes we forget that delayed obedience is still disobedience.
Yeah.
And I know that I feel really guilty of that sometimes where, and here's the thing. I never come on here and think we should be perfect. I mean, I look at Moses. He didn't get to go into the land because he lost his temper and he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And to me, I'm like, all the things he did right, that was like, it seemed so minuscule. However, I believe there's a lot more reason than that. I believe that Joshua was supposed to be the next one, this passing of the torch of leadership. And sometimes we're called to do that too. Sometimes things are just in our life for a season. But anyway, I just think about that and I think, man, I do a million times worse than that. And my mouth can just get me in so much trouble.
Yeah.
And I say and do things that do not glorify and honor the Father. And I don't always walk uprightly. But we know that there's forgiveness. And, I was even wondering, like, do I really just take that for granted? Like, do I just do stuff out of rebellion? And then I'm like, well, I'll be forgiven because I do a lot of things right. And that's kind of very intentional sin. I mean, that's like saying, I know he's going to be mad and I know he doesn't want me to do it. But you know what? I'll just ask for forgiveness and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Ooh, that is definitely a rebellion, right?
Right? That's flat out rebellion. But
Yeah.
I think if we're honest with each other and we
Hmm.
have those conversations, I mean, every time we go to snip at someone, every time we tell a lie, every time we lose our cool, every time we, I don't know, choose to not be generous. Like we know someone's in need, but we're like, I'm not giving them my money, or I don't want to do
I
that.
don't like them enough.
Yeah. We sit in this place of judgment. And I wrote down, as I was going through like leadership and just talking about uh justice and righteousness, and that we are to be, our character matters, and that whole third commandment of do not bring his name to naught. And it's like righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne, and steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. That needs to be us.
Yeah.
And the righteousness and the justice. So then I didn't get a chance to really look, but if you had to define biblical righteousness, I'm putting you on the spot.
Ugh.
How
Biblical
would you, like,
rights.
if someone just asked you, hey Robin, what do you think righteousness is? What would you say?
Well, God shows us how high his standards are, right? Through giving us his commandments. And we inevitably fall short continuously,
Yeah.
which, it does prove the point. I have to learn how to please him. I also have to submit to the wanting to for him to teach me. But I mean, it's righteousness. It's pure, it's holy, right? There's no error, none.
So I always used to think of righteousness as, well, the Torah is righteous, right? Because it says, your Torah is truth and your righteousness is righteousness forever. And I'm like, oh, those things all align, like Torah, truth, and righteousness. But someone can follow Torah and be unrighteousness. You can do the things, but ultimately and this is what my belief is right now, and I reserve the right to change my mind on the definition and how I define it. And anyone who has an idea of how they would define righteousness, please, please, please put it in the chat. We can dialogue about it. But it is not only obeying, but it's the heart in which you do it with, and it's the way in which you represent his character.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if I'm thinking I'm righteous because I'm just keeping the commands, right? Like I'm keeping Sabbath, I'm keeping the feast, and I'm eating clean, so therefore I'm righteous. But my heart towards my neighbor is wicked. And one of the things that I kind of got out of my study was something simple like, what are the weightier matters? It's to, love the widow and the orphan and take care of the sick and the poor. Like those are the weightier matters, because that's what flows from the heart. We want that. We want our love for our neighbor to flow from our heart to make sure that everyone is cared for. But this was a question that someone asked, and I thought this is a great question because it's relevant for today. This was in Gail's teaching. What do we do to still leave the corners of our fields to be gleaned? I'm seriously asking all of you ladies that right now. Like, it's rhetorical, but can you think of a way in which you're living out Torah in a way that honors the weightier matters, glorifies the Father with your actions, and you're following that law, right? Of leaving the corners of your fields to glean. I want to give you an example of someone who, and I'm going to tell her this, like a couple weeks ago said this to me. So I was talking to a friend, and she's getting ready to move, and she had like a whole garage full of stuff. And she is a single mom, and she struggles with money. And I said, oh, this is just an opportunity for you to like put away some money for a feast. Like you could make a killing off this garage sale. And without any hesitation, she said, that's not my goal. This is how I let people glean from the corners of my field. If someone comes and wants something, I'm just going to give it to them.
Oh, wow.
And I was so convicted, because I'm like, how often do I just, when I have an opportunity to make money, or when I have an opportunity to, like I'm thinking, oh, I need to make some more money for Sukkot. I didn't put enough aside during the year because I was too busy buying linen, and so I used some of my feast money. I got to hurry up. So maybe I should sell my linen. But I'm thinking, what an amazing answer. And then she's, well, the Father always provides for feasts. I don't need to worry about that. So this, to me, that was an act of righteousness, because she is literally doing Torah, but to the benefit of other that glorifies God, because she's like, well, maybe if some people don't like to take stuff for free, so maybe I'll just tell them like a quarter or whatever, like just whatever they feel led to give. But I'm not going to put prices on my stuff, because I don't want to turn anyone away if they have a need. This is truly setting aside what is good for you. I need money for the feast. Like I'm trying to honor God. See, I go to the feast. I'm righteous, but there's no gleaning, right?
Right.
So
that's a muna, right? Like the faith that the Father will take care of my feast because he wants me there. And so doesn't he certainly go back to what you said, where you're quoting the Lord, where he says, I despise your feasts, right? Why? Because of your heart.
Yes.
That's why I despise it.
Let's talk.
It's a pecking order instead of how many can I get? How many can we gather? How many can we get in? How many can we make sure that they feel loved and appreciated and cared for so that they want to, right?
So I've always thought of Isaiah chapter 1. Of course, when you come into Torah, you can make things mean what you want them to say to make everyone else wrong. That's how we are, like Torah terrorists. But I always thought this one was, it says, he says, I hate your new moons and your appointed times. They are a trouble to me, and I'm weary of bearing them. And when you spread out my hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands have become filled with blood. Wash yourself and make yourself clean. I'm like, oh, those are the people doing Christmas and Easter, right? Because they're not his appointed times. I always wanted to make that mean that because I wanted to prove to everyone that's not Imuna. That's not really loving people in a way that draws them into faith. That was telling people, I am righteous, you're not, because I keep his appointed times and you don't. See, he hates what you do. And Father, forgive me for the wickedness of my heart. No, I'm not saying it doesn't have anything to do with improper festivals. But the way I read it this year and how I looked at it as you're coming and you're trying to check all the boxes, but your heart to come and honor me, you're not doing really what I'm asking you to do. You're just trying to make yourself look righteous in front of other people. But where is your heart to serve me? So even thinking about the upcoming fall feast, ladies, here's another question. What are you most looking forward to in the fall feast? Is it camping with friends, sharing recipes? All that's good. But why are we gathering? What is the purpose of us gathering? And Marcia and I are Sukkoting together. And sorry, Erica, we wanted to come see you, but we decided to stay local. But we're camping together, and her and I both were really feeling led this year. Like last year, it was all about lots of people and lots of, campfires and big meals, and this year it's like, who can we get to know better and how can we spread God's love? And we both came to the table like with this desire to not be in big groups and do big things, but we just want to honor his name. Yeah. And I think that is a transition towards that imuna and towards like loving him and being, I hate to say like we're being more righteous because that's for him to determine that level of righteousness. But right. Like, where's our heart when we're going into the feast days? What do we want? What do we want? I mean, what does he want? Let me actually rephrase that. What does he want from us during this feast season? And is that what we're willing to give? Or do we have our own agenda for the feast? Because I believe this is talking about we go to the feast with our own agenda.
We do. Well, and that goes to, what is it? I want to say it's like, this is not our Haftarah portion. Let me broadcast real quick. We'll take a sidebar. But it ties right in, because what is it that the Lord requires? I think it's Isaiah 58, right? Or is it 56? Yeah, it's Isaiah 58, and it's about fasting that pleases the Lord, right? And it's talking about the season of Yom Kippur, right? It's talking about the Day of Atonement where you afflict your soul, and this is really weighed in on me because I'm like, whew, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this. Fasting is not hard if you want me to avoid food. I think I can do that. Now, the problem is that the Lord says in 58:6, is this not the fast that I have chosen to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh. Not to, definitely don't neglect your own family, right? And so if I break that down and we look at what that says, right? Because it's like, okay, what do you mean here? I'm supposed to, maybe I give my bread to the hungry. He's talking about setting captives free, right? He's talking about letting them go of heavy burdens, forgiving them of heavy burdens, mercy. To let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke, that you are speaking life, you are loving them in such a way that they are losing chains, right? And how do we do that? Well, verse 7, isn't that appropriate? Verse 7, it is, is it not to share your bread with the hungry? Well, what is the bread? It's the bread of life. It's the word of God. I mean, we're over here thinking of fasting and afflicting ourselves and denying ourselves food and really, and then we are grieved about our own sin. Don't get me wrong.
What is that?
What he would rather. What?
What are you reading?
Isaiah 58.
Oh, 58. Okay.
Yeah, 58. So not our Haftarah. Let me put that in the little caption, just so that people aren't confused. But just like, what is it that the Lord requires? Because I think that that's part of what Moses is, giving them the pep talk about. You're going into a holy space, and you've got to be a holy people. And it's not about, because so reality, right? Like, because we know we are not righteous. We know that, like, I said something I shouldn't. I harbored an attitude, or I'm harboring an attitude in my heart. I'm keeping grudges or whatever. Isn't it easier to go, I need to make the checklist. I'll not fat. I'll deprive myself breakfast for you, Lord.
Wow.
And, I'll spend a little more time in my prayer closet, but are we doing that? Like, and are we thinking that that's the gift that he wants? Let me bring you my self-sacrifice. Isn't that diminishing the sacrifice that he made for us?
Yes.
I want to do those things out of love, reverence, humility, submission, and so that I keep that line of communication crystal clear, because I don't want to step into areas. I don't want to go into realms that he's not calling me. I don't want to trespass where I don't belong. But the thing that he really wants, the sacrifice that he really wants from us, is get more people into his kingdom.
Yeah.
Build it. Make more living stones. Make more disciples.
Well, if you think about Yeshua and some of the parables, the kingdom of heaven is like, and a lot of times it is about multiplication, right? A lot of those parables are about multiplying the kingdom, and the kingdom of heaven is here now.
It is. It's
Like,
right.
there is a future kingdom, but the kingdom of heaven is the kings and priests. And so when we talk about, well, let's just bring this up for a minute. So when we talk about in Isaiah,
Boy, we love him.
I'm studying Isaiah, and actually I told Marcia this morning, or maybe I told you, like, I've got to get into Devarim because I love this book, but I have been doing a lot in Isaiah. Man, I'm getting a lot out of it. But so we start in Isaiah chapter 1, and our Haftarah is chapter 1.
Haftarah.
Haftarah. This is the actual Haftarah in Isaiah chapter 1, 58. But most of Judah's been destroyed for their rebellion, and Jerusalem is still standing there. But Isaiah is his job, which, think about Isaiah and Jeremiah, they had really difficult jobs, right? Like, they're out there telling people, listen, you better shape up or ship out. But Isaiah was warning of this coming destruction because the hypocrisy and the corruption. This is the Gail Heaton almost quote. I'm kind of paraphrasing Gail Heaton from Haftarah. The hypocrisy and corruption was masquerading as piety.
Yes.
So they were thinking they were being super upright, but they really weren't being very upright, because their hearts, like Robin said, was not right. There was a ton of hypocrisy going on. There was corruption going on, but they really wanted to appear holy. Right. Isaiah was encouraging repentance, and he was under, I think it was 4 kings, one of them being Hezekiah. And Hezekiah was a king, and I don't know a lot about his story, so Robin, I know you studied Hezekiah more than me. But one of the things about Hezekiah that's important to notice is one of the things that made him a good king was he helped people return to Torah. He brought them back to Torah, but he was also the king who said, you can't just check the box. You've got to have righteousness in the land to give the Torah meaning. So if we think about what we were talking about with the righteousness, it's your heart to honor God's name, or like what Robin was saying, like, how do we want to do these feasts, and what do we want to represent? Like, if we fast or whatever, we want to do it out of a desire for worship, and we want to do it out of a desire to please him, not like, all right, Lord, I'm going to do something for you today. I'm skipping breakfast. Look at me, right? Like, so leave that attitude at the door. Actually, leave that attitude outside the camp. It does not belong inside the camp. But, and Robin, you and I have talked about this. Like, I have always struggled with fasting. I have never been good at it. I have prayed about it. I have asked the Father to show me. The only day I do well is Day of Atonement, because it is solemn, right? And it's like, I know that I need to do this because I want to just empty myself of everything, including nutrients, that day, just to be able to confess all that I had done wrong all year, that I hadn't brought before the throne.
Right.
But every other time, it's just like what you said. It's like, okay, so I think I'll get up this morning and let's see, I won't eat breakfast. I want my coffee, so I'll still do coffee. And, and it's like we make this bargain, and it's like, am I pleasing him when I do that? I don't think so. And so I think that's why I've never done it. 'Cause I'm always like, Father, what do you want from me? How do you want this fast to look? I am not saying that fasting is not beneficial, but if my heart is not in that place and I'm not trying to do it of a place to serve him, but I'm just doing it to say that I fasted, like, look, God, I gave up something for you, then I'm not doing it for the right reasons, which is why I have struggled to do it because I am not in that space where I really feel like I'm doing it for the right reason,
Yeah.
which is horrible. I hate to admit that, but it is just the flat out truth. So maybe someone
Because
else.
it's what we're cautioned against,
Hmm.
you know? And so I think that that fasting is kind of that Kadesh. It's that
Yeah.
holy place. And I know that if I go in there with the wrong heart attitude and the wrong heart posture, I can give the enemy a significant, weapon to wield against me. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so, I love Isaiah that 58, because what he wants us to do is help when we break bread with somebody else, what we're doing is we're sharing. This right here is breaking bread with one another. This is what I read. This is what the Holy Spirit, dug out of his word and kind of served up to me. And maybe it'll be applicable to you somehow. And that's what breaking the bread is. So yes, feeding the poor, but feeding the poor in spirit too. Don't neglect, don't forget, them as well. And so, it's just to
I really love that, Robin. That really speaks to me. Like, that really, really speaks to me because I'm even thinking like I was giving the story of the lady with the garage sale. Now that was a sacrifice.
yeah,
That was, I mean, I don't know if I want to call it fasting, but man, was that a wonderful way to say, well, I really need the money, but you know what? I'm going to give it away. That's sacrificial, right?
that
Like
is that.
I'm not here to collect for me. I'm here to be a demonstration of God's love.
Right.
And I'm going to pour into other people, letting them glean from my fields. Um, and I can self-sacrifice that because I know that the Father is going to provide in the long
Exactly. That's I think that is a really good picture to fasting, right? The fast that he desires.
run. Yes,
Um,
well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't sound like fasting, but to me,
it
when
is.
you self-sacrifice something and you give something of yourself to empty yourself for another person or for the Father, I mean, either way, then you're fasting. And so it doesn't have to be like, I'm not eating breakfast or I'm giving up sweets or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. No, but when you know that goes back to Amuna, right? The faith of I didn't obtain any of this from myself. It came from him, so it's
Yeah.
going back to where he wants it to go. And then also I'm counting on his provision to bring me into his feast because I know that's where he wants me. I mean, that's just the absolute epitome of trust, especially if you're in a position where no, an extra, $100, $200 would be really nice. It would be really super helpful. In this particular time. So I do think that that's the fast that he genuinely desires. And I think both have merit. There's a time to,
Sure.
but also weighing that out and making sure that I'm not like trying to, you know, am I trying to atone for something? Right? Is my fasting where I deny myself? Am I trying to atone for something? And I hope not, because that price was paid, and no amount of sacrifice that I give, if I think that I'm making it up and I'm earning it in some capacity, no, because he says, blessed David it recounts, blessed is the man who the Lord does not impute his sins.
Yes.
Right? The Lord is gracious and merciful, not because I've earned it, but because he loves me that much. He loves you that much. It was forgiven before it was finished. And the finishing of it was to let you know that it's sealed, it's done, which should free us. If I'm not trying to
Should
work,
free us and it should also humble us.
yeah, right?
Like when you say that, and it just gives me like goosebumps. Like I just am. thinking about that, and he sealed it with his own blood.
Yes.
And our response to that,
Mm-hmm.
which is very different than what we hear in traditional church, is obedience,
Yeah.
right? And I think of Hebrews 26. No, Hebrews 10:26. I mean,
There you go. Yeah.
Hebrews 10, is it 10:26? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, if we purposely sin after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a slaughter offering for sin, but fearsome anticipation of judgment and a fierce fire which is about to consume the opponents. Anyone who has disregarded the Torah of Moshe dies without compassion on the witness or two of three. How much worse punishment do you think he deserves, the one who has trampled the Son of Elohim underfoot, counting the blood of the covenant by which was set apart as common, and insulted the Spirit of grace? Like, those verses, that when I first came into Torah, those verses were probably the ones that hit me the most. Like, if I continue to transgress the law after what Yeshua did, it is like trampling on the blood. That's the humility I'm talking about. Like, this obedience, this discourse that Moses gives at the beginning of the portion, reminding the children, this next generation, like, listen, your parents screwed up royally. They did not have faith. They did not trust in the Father. They witnessed all these miracles and they still struggled. Well, you know what? You are going to get to go into the land. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Stop the sinning.
Right.
Learn the Torah. Obey the commands, but do it with a heart of love. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and worship in spirit and in truth. Do it on both sides. It's not a checklist for you. It's something we want you to do, and we want you to live it so that you represent the Father. Your integrity and the way you live your life is a true demonstration of his character.
Yes.
And that means that we love on people that we maybe don't think are so lovable sometimes. And maybe we have to give up money or possessions or things that we have that make us comfortable. And it's funny because I've heard people say, and I'm sure I've done this too. I can't recall an example, but I'm certain that I have. Well, God hasn't really told me to give it, so I'm not giving it. Right? Like, yeah, I don't really feel led to give that money to that homeless person on the corner or whatever. But I just think that there's something to be said for that sacrifice, as you pointed out, fasting. It's a self-sacrifice to honor the Holy One.
Yes, I love that. And I want to, look at chapter 3 of this, and just the continuation, right? Like, there's just builds and builds where Moses is like giving this pep talk. And Devarim, yeah.
Or Devarim, I mean.
Yeah. And he just is reminding them of the giants that have already been defeated, all that the Lord has done. And so while we can read that in the with our eyes, and we can think of physical giants, it's a physical giant, folks, my attitude. But he can overcome. Behold, he's overcome the world, right? He can overcome that too. That in me too. Like Eric, I think you posted it back in the chat, like, taking into account every idle word, because it's going to be judged. That one is like, oh no.
But I think that is faith. Like, so if you read something in the word, like, we will be, and yes, thank you for putting that in the chat, Erica, because I read it too and was like, oh snap, man. But if we don't take into account that every idle word we say, every bit of gossip, every complaint is going to be judged, we're like, oh no, it won't. Like I kind of said earlier, like, I literally willingly entered into a intentional sin this week, knowing it was not going to please him, but it was just all about pleasing the flesh in that moment. Now, I will tell you, I immediately repented and I felt horrible. As a matter of fact, I was in tears over it because I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I did it anyway. Like, this Amuna idea, this faith idea, is not doing those things.
Yeah. So we had the privilege of a really good teacher, Ed Harris. He came to Beta Me this last week, and I snapped a picture because he talked about Amuna, And I loved how he put this into, if you look at the words in the Hebrew, the aleph, the mem, the nun, and the hey, and you put them together, just like you did, Jen, with the 5 books of the word. And what is it saying? What does that develop? And it says, building Amuna in the Lord connects me to his plan for kingdom causes and causes me to walk in the ways of both Moses and Messiah, which brings about redemption and transformation. Faithfully walking brings me the soul correction that I truly need and teaches me how to live in the divinity and not in my own ways.
Man,
I was like, oh, that right there,
just the
because
ending. Teach me to live in divinity and not my own ways. Like,
yeah, how do it teaches
help
me.
Father, to see your plan for my life. Help me to self-correct when I am in the flesh or when I am not representing you well. But that's what you were saying earlier, like, oh, I forgot what you said, but we want to be connected to him at
Mhm.
all times. I think you said
Yes.
like earlier in the conversation, right?
Yes.
Like,
Mhm.
how do we stay connected to the
Right.
Father so that we hear his voice and make good decisions?
Yeah.
Because we want him to be leading this whole entire path. He's our leader. And then if we're doing it right, it should draw others to follow us because we're following him.
Right. Which is what Paul said,
When I
where
talk about leadership, I'm bringing
imitate me. Yeah. I love that. I just love that. I
but
love that.
ultimately that's how it should be, right?
Yeah. Follow the
His,
leader. Monkey see, monkey do.
but his Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, is a draw. So the draw is if we are emulating the Father and we truly have a heart for others and we are walking out Torah with compassion and empathy and all of those things, then how will people not be drawn to it? Because it's beautiful and it's perfect.
Yeah.
We're not beautiful and perfect, but his ways are.
His ways are.
We can be a demonstration of that to some degree. I mean, we'll never be. It's funny. I just always feel of myself. I think of myself as I just fail every day. And I am so thankful for his mercy, and I am thankful for grace, and I am thankful for the blood. But Gail also said in her Haftarah, she said, most people in Torah, we really get mad when people say, God knows my heart. But there are times when that's appropriate, right? And I would say it now, like, God knows that I want to do better. Like, I pray all the time, but this flesh just gets in the way. And I have so much spiritual growth to do. I mean, I'm not even close to where I know he wants me to be, but every day I get up and I want to try.
Exactly.
And that's why you keep your nose in the Bible and you hang out with people who edify you. And I know for some people, they don't have the social circles, they don't have the communities, but even this community or any community that is walking like-minded, it's so important because there are days when actually Marsha did that for me this morning. I was having a pity party about something and I called her and girl just set me straight. And I was like, thank you so much. I was not calling you for that, but your words resonated because she speaks truth and she's not afraid to do it in love at all. And so then the rest of the day, my attitude was a little bit different because I'm just kept thinking about the words that she said to me. And it matters. The people who you hang out with matter. How you spend your time matters, and not being in front of the TV, but being in the word or listening to worship or audio Bible or, something where our hearts and minds are just being focused in that direction, because the enemy wants nothing more than to pull us away from that. And I felt that. I was at a conference this week. Robin knows this, but for everyone else, I was at a work conference in Utah. I was in Mormon capital of the world. I was in Salt Lake City. And I was there Sunday through Wednesday, and I am very structured with how I do my Bible study. And I get up in the morning. I've been trying lately to do the Amidah in the morning, which is a traditional prayer, and some different things. And I was completely off my game, out of my element. Everything suffered. And I thought, this is why we have structure. This is why God is a God of order. very hard to function when you live in a life of chaos. And so what do we do to help bring in structure to keep our eyes focused? Because I think it's a leadership quality. Like, a leadership quality is to have a level of order.
Yes, I do agree. Yeah, you can't, a leader after God's own heart is going to do what God does, which is bring order out of chaos, right? We're going to bring shalom.
Yes.
You have to, that's something to keep in mind, right? Like, if I'm entering into conversation with somebody, if I'm entering into, maybe uncomfortable conversation, right? Because beliefs are different. Am I bringing shalom with that? Am I bringing peace? Am I encouraging them where they are? And not trying to, like, well, look what I know, but, like, let me agree where I can, right? With what God is doing, and press into that. And it's okay. And I don't have to do the opposite, right? I don't have to bring out my sword. He says we're gonna beat our swords into plowshares, and we're gonna realize that we're supposed to cultivate the soil of people's hearts.
Yeah.
That's my job. Not to be the one to, do anything else with that soil, but make it softer.
We're not a savior. It's not our job to
No,
save.
not my job. It's not my job.
Yeah, that's a blessing when you think about it,
It
because we
is.
don't
Be a burden
we
I
don't
would.
have that ability to choose who's saved and who's not saved, and what resonates with people and what doesn't.
Right.
But Moses gave them the word.
Yeah.
He reiterated a lot of the word, and he did it in a way that was edifying. It built them up, it prepared them, it reminded them. So sometimes when we're talking to people, maybe it's just a matter of reminding them of God's faithfulness, and look at the times when God has been faithful to you, and look at the times that he's demonstrated love or compassion or empathy or whatever. I mean, I know there's so many times in my life that I can point out how and when he showed up, and just being blown away, thinking I did not deserve that goodness. But we can forget that too. And I think a huge part of, this is the testimony. And so, how many of you have been really encouraged by someone sharing a testimony? So don't not share your testimony. I've heard people say, "Oh, I hate sharing my testimonies because I feel like I'm always bragging about what the Father does for me." I'm like, that's the devil talking. You stop that. Like, why wouldn't you want to share your testimony with everyone? Encourage us and remind us of who he is and what he's done, because ultimately that really is what Moses was doing. He kind of started out like, hey, do you remember all the cool things he did? Your fathers, they rebelled, but this is the God we serve. These are the things he's done. So don't ever feel like you can't share. I mean, if someone doesn't want to hear your testimony, there's a problem. Someone
Yeah.
doesn't want to hear the miracle that the Father just pulled out for you, that's a problem.
Yeah. And people need encouragement, right? That's kind of how we help. That's kind of part of the process of how we set captives free is, hey, I was a captive once. Here's how he freed me, right? Because those are the ways that we relate to one another.
Yeah.
So, maybe if we've got to encourage, I know it gets hard, it can be uncomfortable, but maybe in those situations where I know, I can be guilty of the complaining or gossiping or any of those things, but maybe we come alongside and go, you know what? This is how, the Father helped me break that. This is how he helped me to tame my tongue and find ways to do that. And obviously you got to do that in a constructive way, right? But I think it's, if we come alongside the same side of the table, always of, I was a captive once to that too. Here's how he set me free, and share of the goodness of God. And then, that love can be seen from your life to the other person.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about the um, Brit Hadashah portion for this was Matthew 24,
Yeah.
and just figuring out quickly how we can tie it in. And so it's Matthew 24. I think it's 1 through, I don't remember, but I think it's 1 through 21 or 1 through 22, something like that. But, these principles in strengthening ourselves and having emunah, going through the process of reminding ourselves of all of the demonstrations where he has shown up and he has proven himself to be loving and faithful. These people in Matthew 24 are ready. I mean, Yeshua is telling them, listen, end of the age is coming. You need to be prepared because there's going to be people who are going to lead you astray, and many are going to come in my name and they're going to say, I am the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to hear fighting and reports of fighting. Nations are going to rise against each other. There's going to be scarcities of food, and there's going to be disease and pestilence and, all of this stuff. And this is just the beginning for you. And they're going to deliver you up to affliction, and they're going to kill you. I mean, there's all of this stuff that's going on. But he says, but he who shall endure till the end shall be saved. And this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all of the world as a witness to the nations, and then the end shall come. So there's just this, it's not easy. Trials, tribulations, we know this. We're going to have some really horrid seasons if we truly are getting towards that, seventh day, and we're expecting Messiah to come back, potentially in our lifetime. And not everyone thinks that, but if you are of that mindset, then you have to understand that Torahlessness is going to abound. But our job is to endure till the end. And how are we going to do that without true faith and righteousness and him by our side? This is where we work on right now, building up our strength for those things. And it's funny that he says, those who endure till the end of all this pain will be saved. And then he says, and this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness.
Yeah.
So we're talking about sacrificing and giving of ourselves and leadership and, having faith and learning from mistakes and teshuvah and setting ourselves right and walking in righteousness and having a heart for the lost and sharing the word. And ultimately, the goal is to make it all the way to the end. All the way to the end. And then that is the good news truly being proclaimed.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that gospel, the good news of his kingdom, right? His kingdom is coming. His kingdom is has already overthrown the enemy. He's waiting on us to just recognize it, do it, and bring it here, right? How do we combat these things, right? The pestilence, famines, all those things, lack of food. Those are all Leviticus 26. Those are all the judgments because of your Torahlessness. Right? How do you combat it? Remain faithful. Remain faithful. That doesn't mean who is the righteous, right? The righteous will fall 7 times, but they'll get up again. Right? So don't be discouraged if you're thinking, my gosh, I've got to sacrificially love. I got to do all these things and I got to do them right all the time. No, you're not. That's not going to be possible. It's not realistic. Unfortunately, it's sad, but it's not realistic. What is realistic, though, is that you continue to press in to learn, to study, to show yourself approved so that you're not ashamed, so that you find out what really genuinely pleases the Father's heart, so that you are more equipped to do it as often as you're able and you resist the flesh. And he has already overcome everything else.
Hallelujah.
The last thing to die is the beast inside of this body, because the lamb was already slain. And I just gotta press in every day to figure out how to get that my Olah offering, right, onto the altar, this body, the beast of this body on that altar, because that's what Paul says is my reasonable act of service. It's just my reasonable act of service.
Reasonable.
Be a living,
just reasonable.
Just reasonable. Yeah, not a fair trade. No. That's just the general situation at hand, is that you are to become a living sacrifice. I am to become a living sacrifice. And if we live sacrificially before others, he is definitely glorified. So I pray that, each of us will be able to let him speak to our hearts to figure out, how can I do that before I go to bed today?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a phone call. to someone who you've put off calling because last conversations were hard. Maybe it's just a simple text to say, I love you and I care about you and I miss you. Maybe it's, I don't know what you could do before you go to bed. Maybe it's just the prayer before you close your eyes to
That's
lift
what I was thinking. Just humble yourself to take it before the Father,
yes.
where you have not been a person of integrity or a brightness
Mhm.
and an attitude or a way that you've interacted with someone.
Right. Yes.
You know, the teshuva process is like daily,
Yeah.
and it's to me it's always like evolving, because there are times when I might be doing something and the Father all of a sudden reveals, like, that's a sin we're going to tackle, and I'm thinking, I didn't even really recognize it as sin before, but now, okay, because now I'm seeing it differently because we mature. And I kind of mentioned this at the very beginning, but we look at Moses's path, and he started not really with a lot of leadership traits, but the Father saw something in him really amazing that he said, no, you're going to be the one. And as I mentioned, like, Moses is like, no, not me. Like, I'm slow of speech. I'm not good looking. Like, no one's going to listen to me. Who am I? But the Father saw something deep down inside. And Moses was a phenomenal man. I mean, if you look at his life and everything he had to endure until the end, he wasn't perfect, but he definitely had emunah. He definitely had faith and belief. Abraham is another example of that. I mean, we see a lot of examples of that in Hebrews 11, like the chapter of faith stories, whatever. But his life, at the end of his life, as he sat there and went through Devarim, I can only imagine all of his experiences, 120 years, and he is giving testimony that the Father is faithful and good. And he became a leader. So my point in saying that is, we may look at ourselves and feel like, oh, we're new in this journey, or we don't know very much, but this is my honest belief. Someone could argue it, whatever, but I don't know if people believe in like predestination or anything like that. But oftentimes, and I know, Robin, you and I have had this conversation, why were we chosen to receive the knowledge that we have? Because it was nothing that we did, right? It was nothing that we did. But I'm guessing if we all think about it, there was a point in time when we asked him a question or made a comment that caused him to realize our hearts were truly for him.
Yeah.
And I know that's true for you and me, right? Like we, and I don't know, maybe it's not a distinct moment, but there was something deep down inside you. And I believe that that's what he saw with Moses. Like,
Yeah.
Moses didn't see it in himself, but he knew that Moses could take on that time frame and do it.
Yeah.
Right. So it was 40 years for Moses, and he had already lived 80, and he had a lot of different experiences living as an Egyptian for the first 40, right? And not having any real background in Torah or anything like that. Right. But we don't know what he had. But anyway, I'm assuming he wasn't, really necessarily well versed in it. But the Father can use people. And if he called us out, and he's given us, even if it's a little bit of wisdom to his ways, to understand that he has something better for us, which is what he told you, right, Robin? I have something better for you. Mm-hmm. And we said, as they did in Exodus 19, we will do, right? What you say, we will do. And I remember my exact words, me being on my knees crying 2.5 years, 3 years before he brought me into Torah, was, Father, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. So I didn't even know I was basically saying Exodus 19, because I didn't know Exodus 19 at the time. And 2.5 years later, he started showing me things. And I remembered he quickly took me back to that promise. And I'm not perfect. But he's growing me, and he's growing you. He's growing all of us. And my point is, we didn't do anything to deserve this, but yet here we are. So there's something in us that he knows. We must have some level of desire to be purified, because we are going against the grain of the world. So there's something deep in us that says, I don't want to look like everybody else. I don't want to do the world's ways. I want to obey. I want to worship. I want to know the Father. I want him to know me. I want intimacy. I want relationship. I want to be a bride. Like, we have that. And I just think it's amazing when you think about it. Like, we just didn't do anything to deserve to be in this place.
No, we didn't. And this past week, one of the things that got that the father told me, like, because I was, here's the thing. I feel like he's given me. Well, I know that he's really opened my eyes to his word, to behold the wonders out of your Torah, right? I know that he's given that to me as a true gift, and I know that he's given that to each of you guys here too. Um, but I've been very, very careful because I didn't do anything to earn this. There's no merit of him extending this to me. And so I'm always very much aware that it's like, if he opens my eyes, he could also close them.
Ooh,
And so this past couple of weeks, like Jen, I went to Colorado, I went on vacation, and I was plugged in audio. I was listening to good teachers while I was gone, but my Bible study, my prayer time, it just wasn't the same. And I came home, and habits, they say it takes like 21 days to form a habit. Well, maybe it takes 21 days or 90 days to form a good one, but it only takes like a week or less to make a bad one, okay? Or to break a good one, right? And so came back, and like really it hadn't all jived together yet. Now the trip was phenomenal. God was still pouring in. But then like last week I was like something's off. Something's not jiving. I've been really tired, haven't been able to get up on time, haven't been able to do my study, haven't been able to do my prayer time like I normally do. What is going on? And I woke up in the middle of the night because the Lord said, you need to pee. And, then of course you're awake for a moment. And I was like, and before I let myself go back to sleep, I was like, you know what, God, here's the deal. I know that this is the time that everything's quiet enough that I can usually hear you pretty well. And I'm like, I need to know, and I need you to tell me very clearly, succinctly, because I don't know what in the heck got unplugged, but I need it plugged back in. That's what I need. And he was like, I've given you a lot of understanding. And if you don't put the doing into place, it's not worth anything.
that's this Torah portion, Robin.
I know.
He gave you the Torah portion a couple weeks early.
Well, he gave it to me this past Tuesday.
Okay.
So not really, but that was it. I've given you a lot of understanding. Lean on it and do it. Do it. Do it in the faith. Do it in Amuna, right? That it builds you up. That it builds up others. You don't have. I don't have any idea as to what happens in the spiritual realm because of our obedience, but things happen in the spiritual realm because of our obedience, and we've got to do it because Matthew 24 says there's a lot of, because of Torahlessness, which means that the Father has either opened eyes and chosen to close them, or people are just growing more and more wicked. But if we're here for that, my charge is don't close my eyes. Don't close my ears off. Don't let me not be able to hear. Don't let me not be able to see. And it's a huge blessing. And it does come at a price, right? I get up earlier, but it's not a sacrifice.
Right.
I somehow or another, I just get up. That's not really what I want to do. I like to sleep. But it's a gift. Being here, having the desire to be drawn into this space, just like they were being drawn into Kadesh, the set apart place. It is an honor and a privilege. And it's not something that we should hoard for ourselves. We got to give it out in love because we want everybody to have this, right? I can't open anybody else's eyes. Heaven knows I've tried. It doesn't work that way. It's not my gift to bestow, but it is like if somebody gives you, like Joseph in his fancy coat, right? Like it did make the brothers jealous, but it was a symbol of love that the Father had given to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wore it proudly.
Yes.
Don't let it become prideful, but but don't be afraid to wear it.
And that's a good point, because we do wear his character. I mean, a lot of times when they talk about garments in scripture, they're talking about character, right? If you cleanse your garments, or he tells you to wash your garments, it's like cleanse your character, get those impurities out of there, or I'm going to throw you in the fire.
Ugh. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's got to be pure, right? He has to have a pure bride. That is not optional. So he's lovingly guiding us that direction, but one way or another, we have to become pure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we need to wrap up for the night because it's 9:15. We can stay and do a few minutes of an after party, maybe just like 15 minutes real quick, and we can see if anybody wants prayer or anything. But these Torah portions are always so applicable, and everybody gets different nuggets out of it. Like, this is what we got, but you may have got something totally different, and that's okay, and it's great. Every year I feel like this is my third time through the cycle, and every year I feel like he gives me a different word. Like this year it was just leadership. Like, are you being a leader? Are you displaying my character? Are you walking in integrity? And I'm like, yeah, no. Right. So like, he's talking to Robin about certain things, and I feel like he kind of is telling me, like, you need to do things that honor my name, because you do represent me. You have my blood covering you. That's like, remember that. And so anyway, on that note, if you're not going to stay and join us for the after party, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we love you. We pray that you have a wonderful prep day tomorrow and an awesome Shabbat, and we hope to see you back next month.
Yes.